We're now joined by David DeFries of Virgin Steele. How are you, David?
I'm all right, Jay. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're very excited about Nocturnes of Hellfire and Damnation, but we'd love to kind of hear how you evolved in music. Give us an idea how you started in music. Who were some of your musical heroes growing up?
Sure, absolutely. I grew up in a very theatrical and musical family. My father was and still is doing live theater, so I grew up with rehearsals and performances of plays, Shakespeare, Greek tragedy, whatever. So that piqued my interest. And then my oldest sister was an opera singer, and my other siblings, my brother and sister, they were always in rock bands. So I was surrounded by, Black Sabbath and Verdi and Wagner and Beethoven and Shakespeare and all this stuff, and I wanted to, be part of it. It was very exciting to me, and I wanted to contribute in some way. So at 11 years old, I decided to join my first band. There was a friend of mine who had a group. He was much older than me, and one day he was a drummer. I just said to him, "I'm going to join your band," and I did. And that's how it began. And I started playing piano around 8 years old, taking lessons, and it just escalated from there. Band after band until finally this one, and went to the university in the early '90s to get really more serious about composition and dove really deep into that side of things, the classical side of things, orchestration, and so on and so forth. And it's just been a learning experience and a wild ride.
And what was the first big arena show you saw? Who really blew your head off when you went and saw the performance?
I think the first arena show was probably Alice Cooper, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I was I think about 11 or 10 at the time. And it was just like, oh my God, what's happening? This is incredible. I'm going to be part of this. We'll just contribute to the whole thing.
The lights,
I'd see
the
my
sound,
brothers and sisters,
spectacle.
their bands play, and I wanted to, dive in there. And then I saw that, and then I saw, later on Queen and God knows what, So, yeah.
Well, that's amazing. And tell us how Virgin Steele originally got together. Who your bandmates were, what the common ground was, and how that evolved into a fully functioning band making original music and getting a deal and taking on the world.
Sure. It all came together really, really quickly. I was going to college with the bass player at the time, the guy Joe O'Reilly, who was on the first couple of records, and there was an ad in the paper. There was a guitar player and a drummer that were trying to form a band, and they were looking for a singer. They weren't looking for a bass player, so I went down there, and there was a whole bunch of characters down there, at this jam thing. But I distilled the fact that there was this one guy, the guitar player. Okay, he might have put the ad in, or the drummer did, but the drummer wasn't there. It was crazy. But anyway, I weeded out all the other people that were there. So okay, you give me the drummer that called me. This other guy, Joey, because he had originally called me, and the four of us got together. It was me, Joe, the bass player who I brought in, who's a friend of mine, Joey Vasian on drums, and this guy Jack Starr on guitar. And we got together actually at my parents' house and played the first rehearsal. I think it was on Halloween. And right away we knew we wanted to do our own music. It wasn't like we were going to be a cover band, though cover bands were quite prevalent at the time and were quite successful on the club scene. But we just wanted to do our own thing, so we got together and wrote and rehearsed for about 3 weeks and went into the studio right away. And then the first album was done in like a week or less, and we decided to press it up. And before the first 5,000 copies was sold out, we had our first deal with Music for Nations. We were actually MFN. Music for Nations won the first release on this English label, and then we got a deal in the States with a label called Mongol Horde shortly after. So it was like a whirlwind thing. Pressed up the first 5,000. I sold them basically from the trunk of my car, and then got the deal in the UK, got the deal in the States, and then it's always started getting more deals in Germany for the next records and so on and so forth. And Germany's been kind of our strong point, for all these years.
Sure.
Where the infrastructure is. Our label again is a German label. Our booking agents in Germany, so it's been kind of a second home for us.
Well, I know it's always hard to find the compatriots, the band members that are not only bringing to the party the level of what you do, but that have the right mindset and temperament, and especially when you're on the road, you're in tight quarters. There's a lot of downtime being around each other. How do you try to, pace all that to keep the mindset strong? Obviously, the energy's got to go into the live performance, but in the evolution of finding the right players and keeping everybody on the same page. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's not been an easy thing. The gentlemen I mentioned about Hurok on the first record or so, they're long gone. Early on, after the second record, I had this other the first change. This guitar player friend of mine, Edward Persino. I was playing with him since we were like 14 years old. It was inevitable that we would end up being in a band together, and he's still with me now all these many years later. I wanted actually him in the band early on, but it didn't really, the chemistry wasn't right with two guitars, so we changed the guitar player. That was the first thing, and he's still been there. He's a longtime friend of mine. He was over here just 2 nights ago. We hang out a lot, we write, we do, we have dinner together and whatever. And then the bass player we changed around 90, and then we had a couple of different people in that slot. But since 2000, we've had the same guy. And then the drummer we changed in 94, and we've had that same guy that we have now, Frank Gilchrist. He's been with us since 94. So that we're keeping the lineup together between myself, Frank, Edward, and Josh, who's the bass player who came in. We're all quite friendly. I think it's a matter of airing your grievances and your differences, and giving each other the space to have your own lives. Bird and Steele was always about, I never wanted it to be a chore to be in the band. It wasn't about being the biggest band or the flavor of the month. It was all just about making a lifestyle that would work for all 4 of us, and we've achieved that, especially with this lineup. And it's still working that way because everybody has space to do their own thing, and they come together when they need to, when we need to, and it goes from there.
So I know you say Germany is a hotbed. It's a foundation for you. Obviously, the German people have a very deep appreciation for, American music and music that comes from England. It's I talk to a lot of artists from around the world, and all the fingers point back to America, and of course the legendary blues artists and the rock and roll pioneers, the Chuck Berrys and Jerry Lee Lewises and Little Richards and these guys. Not only have our music influenced the British bands, but our music is revered around the world, and even though some of the founding heavy metal bands are from England, so much of the music of the audience is from America. So, why do you think it is about the German people that embrace what we do so well, and why, again, there's been this, admiration for American music going all the way back?
That's a good question. I guess it's maybe they inherently sense that freedom that's in there. There's something about the blues and just even if you're just doing the 1-4-5, there's so much freedom in that music that can be uplifting, and it's interesting that you mentioned the blues because we're not a blues band obviously, but we've always maintained an element of that even from the early days, and that's more prevalent now on the new record. There's a kind of a new strain that's creeping through my writing that I call the Gothic blues. It's not blues per se, but it is related to that, like your Howlin' Wolves and your Muddy Waters and Robert Johnson and all that. But it's got this other thing. It's a darker, blacker element in there. And I don't know. I guess maybe there's something about that music that's just for me is just very liberating. And I've always wanted to keep that side of it alive. And I think that's kind of what has differentiated us from a lot of the other metal bands that are our peers, because they don't have so much of that. Is that kind of earthiness, that sensuality that comes from the blues, the sweat, the sex. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, well, that's very well put. And I noticed that Josh, your bass player, he's playing 7 and 8 strings. Talk a little bit about that. That's obviously somewhat progressive. That's out there a little bit, stretching the normal four string bass. What do you see that strengths are in tunings and things like that with multiple strings?
Yeah, well, he's always been into that, the 7-string guitar, the 8-string guitar, the 5-string bass, that sort of thing. It gives more depth because we can go way deeper with things like Glamour is a track that was done with the 7-string, so is Delirium. And Edward stays on the 6-string, so anything we do with, if we want to change, get more of the depth, and we actually do like strange tunings. So I get into that. But Josh is more of a standard tuning with the 7 or the 8-string. Though we did actually, I believe Glamour we tuned down to an A. The B string was an A on that track. So yeah, it's nice when you're. I write everything on the piano, and I try to voice that across the band, so the guitars will be playing some part of the chord, the bass will be playing something else. So you have this kind of the richness of like when you're sitting at the piano. It's not just everybody's playing the root and fifth, and we're all jamming on the same note. It's wider than that, so the harmony is richer. That's what it does for us.
That's amazing. Now it brings us to Nocturnes of Hellfire and Damnation. I know it's not a concept album, but there's a line that connects the tracks, and you're dealing with a lot of the relationship issues and some pretty deep stuff that a lot of bands aren't digging into. Tell us about the making of this album and what these lyrics and concepts mean to you.
Sure. It's not a concept album like the House of Atreus was, but there is a connection or a through line that connects most of the tracks, and it's largely about chemistry, if you will, like when you meet another person and what happens when your orbit crosses theirs. Do sparks fly? Is it negative energy? Is it positive energy? That kind of a thing. But it also has to do with connections, not just between people, but between like yourself and your loves and hates, your desires, your passions, your obsessions. Also, it goes like into the spiritual realm. There's Persephone and Hades, that relationship, and this cycle of rape and plunder with her mother Demeter and Poseidon, the brother of Hades, and that kind of a thing. So there's that in there, but largely is about the human connection and about the various ways that we entangle ourselves and can destroy ourselves. It's a lot of the negative vibe put out there on the record, probably because life is gone largely that way in a lot of ways, and we are people that dig deep, dive deep, and it's the life that I personally lead is pretty chaotic and whatnot, and so I draw inspiration from my relationships, personal and otherwise, and what happens with me and the things that I go through, believe in, things that make me crazy. For example, the song Glamour. On first glance, when you look at the lyrics, you say, okay, he's talking about a woman, some relationship he has or had or whatever. And yeah, I am, definitely. But if you look at it again, I'm also talking about my relationship with music, what that has done to me, for me, the good, the bad, and the ugly, all that. So it's my obsession, my passions are in there, all the insanity of life.
What are the standout tracks for you? What are you most excited, most proud of? Achieving?
On this record, I really, really do like all the tracks, but I guess personally I'm quite involved with Delirium. That's really kind of my life right there. It sums it up, that track. Persephone, because I like that kind of barbaric romantic quality. It's like one of the kind of epic-y kind of songs. Persephone, Glamour, Delirium, Fallen Angels, another track that's dear to my heart. Yeah, it's one of those records where I love all the tunes, but I guess those you could say off the top of my head.
Great. Well, I know the business has been evolving, and of course, you're trying to make the most of your talents and your career with the label choices and your booking agents and all that. But obviously, behind the scenes, there's been this evolution, of labels and record stores and how people are buying music or not buying music. How do you deal with all that? Do you shut yourself out from that, just make the music and let the companies handle it, or what are your feelings? Obviously, you pour so much time and resources into making these records, putting on these shows, and videos and live touring and all that. None of this is for free. Obviously there's a younger audience that thinks music is free. How do you deal with that, and what can you impart on this newer generation and understand what it takes to not only make your music, but this entire industry, this infrastructure that if everybody stops getting paid, what the destruction or culmination of that would be?
Yeah, it's very different than when we first began. Sure, absolutely. Luckily, when we began early on, it worked out quite well for us. And I've always been a very, organized and somewhat, as far as monetary things are concerned, conservative.
Yeah.
So I saved, and wasn't like one of these wild guys who, bought cars and all kinds of stuff. I like to live simple.
Yes.
And keep it close to the vest in terms of that. So as things got crazier, I just kind of husbanded my resources and kept it together. And now it's actually working a little bit more in our favor again. For a while there was almost like it was like dead in the water. Nothing was happening. But now it's a little bit of a turnaround where things are. I belong to all kinds of various societies for the protection of the songs and such. I'm the publisher as well as the writer, so it's a little different in my case for some people who just maybe play on a record, so there's other streams of income for that. But even that is not like it was, 20 years ago. It's changed. It's changed radically because, as you say, it's all up there on YouTube. It's free, and people, I guess at some point when it becomes so dried up, then they're going to say, well, what happened? And the reason is because, everything was for free. It's even happening with film now. It's a very strange place. But getting back to like how we began one, Virgin Steele was not, as I may have said earlier, designed to be the flavor of the month or the biggest band on the planet. We never cared about that. It was really only about making the kind of music that we wanted to make, never compromising for the sake of any kind of fame or success of that type. It really didn't interest us. We weren't afraid to work and do other things while we were putting the band together and making it happen. I worked in a factory. I cut up steel for years, before, I was making enough money from the music to not do that anymore. I gave piano lessons, things like that. None of us were afraid to work. We always, dove in deep, and whatever happened to happened. We just wanted to do the music that we wanted to make, and a lot of our fans, people in general who meet us, don't understand. Why aren't you bigger? Why don't you want to be bigger? Not really. If it happens naturally, great. So be it. But of course, I'm out here promoting the record. I want people to know about it because we worked hard on the record, and we're proud of the record and proud of what we've done in our history, and we want people to know about it. But we're not going to jump up and down and try to jump on a bandwagon and be something we're not. It's got to happen naturally and honestly. That's our thing.
Yeah, well, hopefully your fans see that sincerity in your music and your desire to be taken on your own terms. And if you like it, support us. We're all for keeping, costs down for a ticket or for a CD or download or whatever. And obviously Apple just announced this big streaming services, more and more of these kind of streaming services. And, we on the creative or the business side just hope that it all balances out where, great people that dedicate their lives to entertaining others, find a way to be compensated for it because it's only fair.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, all that you've seen in the business, David, what advice do you give to those, young singers, young bands, young players today? Maybe not so much on the business side because, again, that's an ongoing evolution, but creatively or just putting your home team, handling your own business from within. What advice do you give to people coming up today?
I would say only be in this because you really just love the music and you have a passion for creating. That's the thing. That's what has driven me and has driven us. Nothing else. Everything else is secondary. It's not about the fame. It's not about any of the other perks that that sometimes happen. It's really just for the music. And I would say if you want to do that, learn as much as possible. Dive in hardcore. Take take lessons, study, see what other people have done, explore other music, not just if you're in a metal band, it doesn't just begin and end there. You've got to dive further, get into the blues, get into whatever, classical music, jazz, bluegrass, whatever the heck you want, anything. Read, dive into literature, explore film, whatever. Inspiration can come from anywhere, and knowledge comes from all sorts of places. I just walk outside of my house, and I'm looking around, I'm looking at trees and the sky, and I'm like, wow, that's incredibly beautiful. If I can only create something like that, that's a lot of times that's my inspiration. Go back in, try to make something that stands like that. Wow, that's proud that will last that long. That's some kind of monumental thing. Always just competing with myself to try to forge further and dive deeper into myself to bring forth what I can bring out. It's really, composing is like, I call it wrestling with the universe, because you have all this insanity of swirling around you and trying to like shape it and like make a new galaxy. That's what a new record is, kind of a thing. So yeah, I think it's learning and then living. You got to live a life. You can't be afraid to live, and you can't numb yourself to pain. I know so many people who just numb themselves constantly with drugs or whatever, and they don't really live. You don't really experience life. You can't numb yourself from life. So I say dive head first into life, dive head first into learning, and write about it.
Well, thank you so much, David. We encourage everyone to go check out Nocturnes of Hellfire and Damnation. Check out Virgin Steele on tour near you. Best of luck in the future. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Jay. Appreciate it. All the best to you.